pretty bright out there.
Yeah.
It's nice. Take
I
this.
hate to block the sun.
I know, but we'll take this weather.
We just got back from a Yellowstone, Wyoming, Montana, Colorado trip.
Fun. How was it?
It was gorgeous the whole time we were there. And they were scheduled to have storms when we left. So I thought it was pretty good.
Cool.
We hired a guide to you can drive around it yourself.
Oh yeah.
But how would you know what you were looking at?
It's like it's big.
Well, and even
big.
if you stop at those markers, you still don't know the whole thing,
Yeah.
like the guide does. He was so good. We kept him for 2 days. He took us up to a resort that had mineral water flowing. You can see it.
Nice.
Yeah, yep. It was on the outside of the building. It goes from here to there. No, I don't think they're going to have that many people. They'll be lucky if they have that many people.
They won't be coming to listen to me.
We would be shocked if they had that many people. That's Southeast Tech.
Oh, Southeast Tech. That's
Yeah.
that's the meaning of this.
We have a few people who talk about.
Sure.
We have to spray season. This happened in like 1 year ago. I don't know. So we can look like that under it. It looks good perfect. And then we have some. We have some time. And we get to the water.
Just finishing up 8 years. Are you ready to go?
Last year, 2 years ago, my brother passed away, and he wanted to be cremated. And so we had him cremated, and then his wife, his widow, would turn us of the ashes. And she sat in that room with us and heard us promise him that we would bury him next to Mom. So we let her have him for a year, and then we went down and got him. And she was a witch cop. We went down and got him, and we took him down to Oklahoma to bury. And she says, I can't give up all of them. And I said, I'll bring you back this much. And she says, why this much? I said, that's his heart. So a witch is. But in Oklahoma, they said, y'all just bring a shovel and go down about 3 feet. You'll be fine. That was it. This old lady was on the White House. And my husband was, 6 years older than me, and he was on the White House. And I teased the girls that I was going to piss them off with this picture. And the two of us watched. Here's a picture of me grabbing him. The guy, with his brother, who had the letter on his arm, that. Is this going to be where that person
Well, wherever you are, I am delivering mail. So wherever you would like to be,
my location?
welcome, welcome. Is this Carly, do you think? Yes, it's Carly.
Good, and you? Right.
Yes, these are $250 gift cards. I like to treat people like this. How do you say? These are yours. Oh, I am wonderful as well.
Okay, I need you to sign there and the date.
I am lying also.
Let's see, it's one today.
Okay, good.
And the winner is
Thank you.
I don't know. Maybe the power of suggestion, maybe this is where Cynthia will sit if I.
And here, so it's sunny outside, and we're hoping to have that through the
Because that would be
Yes. See, I never thought about last time. That's all I have to say. So I'm hoping that you bring that conversation.
Pardon? Sorry. Why would his manners need to improve just because there are more women on the board? I don't think it has any, yeah. I would expect him to behave in any way. Yeah. Right, exactly. This is supposed to be a good thing. Just so share some more vision for some for the group of work.
Something.
No, I was just going the same day. City of Marion. I should communicate this with you. I went to one meeting for 6:30 together. So last because it used to be it was a 6 o'clock start. Yeah. And
first time around, I got
Did that come from Sioux Falls?
These kind of parts. I learned something.
You learned something?
You know how I've been arguing about our agenda?
Yeah. Which part of it?
If there's a motion,
Yeah.
it has to be a second.
Okay.
So she asked for,
A motion to adjourn?
And we make the motion, then we have a second.
Okay, so that, how do you, does
Otherwise,
she just
she could
adjourn?
just
She can
get
just adjourn the meeting?
But since we always, as long as I can remember, have asked
That's for a motion to adjourn.
we have to actually,
We have to act on it.
Todd said, he said, oh, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
And so I came up with all the proof for a fight. Shut me down. Oh, here we see you.
I'm not sure I tried to see foods. I was going to see that I can't wait to see that. Yeah, guess I could check with
Yes,
to see.
I would help. Should be connected to, Deanne. I always forget her name because it's not Bob Peters anymore. That's why. It's not, it doesn't roll off the tongue.
Yeah.
But Andrea can get you connected to the Head Start.
Oh, she's a head start, right?
Mhm.
Okay, yes. So I actually am waiting to return a call to Elizabeth. She's tried to get in touch with me on different subjects, so I can maybe just, if you're okay with that, I can just mention that. That would be great. Okay. And if she reaches out, the last name starts with a J. It's on Elizabeth. Elizabeth. Yeah. Got it. And you'll look at it. On August 19th, I went to So I don't know if it's changed or what, but usually it's like once a month on Monday. It's when it usually is. I'm not sure if that's common or
for
they
the
read.
2 years I was
Right. And
it used to be at Hawthorne. But then they started moving it.
okay, I will make sure to mention that. And do you check the classes up to okay, do you want the name involved? Right on, please. Okay. I will have okay.
That was it?
That was it.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. I tried. That's why I didn't just start with she knows that. I use
Yes.
I never send them to you.
Yeah, September and October.
Only when specific. I really don't. I think that's what we're doing. It's like we just use, again, obviously the word that's small. And I'm saying, and that's why I do need time to do it we're thinking about it. We're kind of like double booked that day. So if we went, we only go for the Lincoln. I would convince Jack to go.
You should come to volleyball. Volleyball starts at.
Oh, yeah, all the boys. Well, we had something going on. Oh,
There's a good crowd last week.
4 o'clock is on.
We don't have very many home games next week. Tuesday. So Aaron's nice.
Because you just send me a text when you send your parents a text. Just add me to the group text. Exactly. You remember PayPal? Exactly.
Yeah.
That's all about it. I had policy in the
All right.
morning.
You had my wrong agenda.
I know, and I
didn't look at Facebook
Hi,
until
I have the wrong agenda.
this meeting.
I think you got the winner.
Was the text right away?
I know, I was gonna bring treats.
Okay, when I give you this, there's
Did I do it wrong?
no, you didn't do it.
That's when we
Oh, I'm
did
sorry.
Oh, you know what? I had Carly sign because she had missed that date and then I didn't see mine.
Yeah,
Okay, this
and
is
every
every
one of
this
these,
was
first time ever that they have a program.
every one of these that have a little flyer at the top.
Yep, I should sign. I know better. I think it's
All their games, so they're pretty Yeah.
this page.
For varsity.
And I try to get these in monthly.
Yeah. She had no idea. She found out like 20 minutes before the first game. But she was filling all the day. So it's just her. But now she's like,
Anybody?
yeah. Yeah. And her coach was like, I want to tell you, give you a little bit of notice so that you have some time to digest it. And a tournament all weekend, and she played.
You can give us
started. Well, she had 5 filled yesterday.
I just had a packet for you, so.
Yeah, and she doesn't seem like she's awkward, like she doesn't get shook up or anything. I'd be nervous. Pep band was playing yesterday at Yankton. Like, oh my gosh.
Doing that to
Oh yeah, it was fun.
If you look on yours.
So that it covers that. Perfect. Thank you.
Oh.
Awesome.
First kid drop was nervous.
Which is a good problem, I suppose. But yeah.
Call the meeting to order. We already were in order. We had executive session, so we'll go right into our board work session. We had no one here to address us as well. So, Dr. Maher, would you like to introduce Wade Courtney?
Absolutely. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce a person with us here today. As we talked about thinking of an appropriate topic today, the topic came up was the topic of boardsmanship, how do effective boards work? And we thought, what a great time to do that when we got a board that's getting along and functioning really well versus at a time of crisis. So that's the impetus for the meeting today, or for the topic of the meeting today. And with that, I know we had some conversations on who could lead us through that exercise. Who would we be able to work with that would really have today be a meaningful day? And it was quickly determined and unanimously, at least with the group that I was talking to, unanimously agreed that that would be Wade Kogan. So I know Wade is probably shocked to hear me say such kind things about him, but it is truly an honor. Thank you for allowing me to introduce Wade Kogan from the Associated School Boards of South Dakota. Wade, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Dr. Maher. It's great to be here. I'm really delighted at the invitation to come and visit with you. This is a little more formal than I was expecting, but that's okay. We'll do it as best we can. And it is an honor to be here. My wife and I have roots in Sioux Falls that go way back. I think it was 1991 when Roosevelt opened. I had the most incredible opportunity to, Karen and I moved from Aberdeen, and I was one of the teachers on the initial team that started to teach at Roosevelt in 91. So now you know how old I am. I started when I was 12, and so we went from there. But I loved Roosevelt. It was great, you know, brand new school and new traditions, you know, meeting all those teachers and this huge group of kids. And that was a great 6 years that I spent here. Karen taught at All City, and oh my gosh, our All City memories are just wonderful in terms of what she did there, and she loved it. So I always love coming back to Sioux Falls and going in. And when you're looking for someone to do the presentation, obviously there was no one else on my staff available today, so I had to come and do it. But,
I wasn't going to mention any of it.
It's okay. You know all too well. But it's great to be here, and I'm not going to talk to you for an hour and a half. I have some questions I want to ask you and some things I want to do. But I do want to tell you, though, that I don't know if you know this, but Dr. Maher got arrested last week. Did you hear about that? I don't know if you knew that. But he had to go before.
You know this is broadcast to our community, don't you?
Yeah. And those people listening, I think they'll figure the joke out eventually. But you're concerned about that. That's good.
A little soundbite is all.
Exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, Brian goes before the court, the judge, and the judge, and by the way, he got arrested for shoplifting. And I would think you guys could pay him enough, you wouldn't have to shoplift, but nonetheless, he got arrested for shoplifting. So he goes before the judge, and the judge says, "What did you steal?" And he said, "Your Honor, I stole a can of peaches." And the judge said, "How many peaches were in the can?" He said, 3. And the judge said that I'm going to sentence you to 3 days in jail. Well, Peggy's in the back of the courtroom, and she stands up and she raises her hand. She says, "Your Honor, he also stole a can of peas." Someone want to explain that to Todd? I don't know, but that Todd. that Todd. We're there.
That's him hysterically laughing.
Yeah, historically. But no, I'm glad to be here, and it's great that we can come together and talk about some things. you know, there are certain basic tenets I think that boards know or should know. And so we have the opportunity to travel around the state and work with all kinds of boards, big schools, small schools, boards that are in crisis, boards that are not. And so it's nice to come here, and when I met in the pre-planning meeting, my intention was to think about what are some things that you would like to discuss in this presentation. And when we have those pre-meetings, I never want to go in there with the idea that there's something wrong, that we have to fix something, and something is there. And it was very clear, both before I got there and in the pre-planning meeting, that your board functions extremely well. And so I don't know if there are any big aha moments or insights that we have, but we'll talk about team building, working as a team. We're going to do some activities. We're going to get up and move around. We're going to have some discussions. And then we're also going to talk about some basic ideas of what all board members should know. So when you come away today, I hope that I can show you maybe one or two items you didn't know. But I also think that as we walk through these different outcomes, that we're going to find some things that we do know, and some things that you already do really well. And so we'll see how that goes and how that goes. So if you have any workshop, the ability to come away with a couple key pieces, I think that's important. So what's in your packet? Well, I made a binder for you that has some basic information. One is going to be the PowerPoint. And by the way, there are 75 slides. I am not going to talk about 75 slides. I'm only going to hit a few. But the rest are for you to read. There are also some select articles that I think are really, really good about what do effective boards do, how do effective teams work together, how do we establish trust with each other. And so if you would take the time at some point in your busy schedule to read those articles, I think you'd find that to be very helpful. At the very end of the packet are some basic laws and basic board member statutes that I think you'd find really interesting. Things that not only establish your authority as a school board, but also some statutes I think that you might not have ever seen before that you would need to know in your work here. And so your establishment as a board is important, and it's important that we have that basic information about laws. There's a piece of the Constitution there and everything else. So that's in your packet. You also have in front of you a little, it's a thumb drive is what it is. And so we just hand these out to you, and the thumb drive, I have to demo this though, because I know one member of the board couldn't figure out, I thought it was just a card that I handed out. But if you take the thumb drive and you flip it out, there is actually a USB connection within that, so you can do that. So that demo was for Todd Coker. All right, let's get into it and talk about some things. In your packet also, you have a card. And I'm going to take the card, and then I'm going to share the information with your chair and tally all this information up. But on the front side, for just one moment, I want you to ask yourself the question, what challenges, or one challenge, that you see your board facing in the next year? And sometimes we do this anonymously. You don't have to put your name on it. You can if you want to. But what's one challenge you see facing your board this year? And on the back side, tell me what you would prioritize as one of your greatest assets as a board. What is your greatest asset as a board itself? So the front side, tell me what is one challenge that you perceive happening this school year. And on the back side, what do you think one of your greatest assets is as a board? All right. My only political statement today is about your authority as a school board. And that's that when I go to Pier and I lobby for all the school districts, I try to make it really clear to legislators that boards are an autonomous political subdivision. They are a governing board in and of themselves. And sometimes our friends in Pier, want to pass laws that tell you as school boards what to do. But I think it's really important to understand that the basis of a school district, the basis of a school board, comes from the authority that's written in statute. And this particular statute talks about 13.8.1, talks about the fact that you have really a sovereign authority as a school board to make decisions, decisions about children, about your district, everything that has to do with owning the district, you have that authority to make. And I tell you that because you already know that. But I want to instill in you that we need to also make sure that our legislators that go to Pier, the folks that represent us in the governor's office, understand that you have that ability and you have complete authority as a board to make those decisions. Now, sometimes people in your community don't like the decisions that you make. Sometimes legislators go to Pier to change maybe the decision that was made or something like that. And I know you've been through a few of those before. But I think it's important that we as board members instill in our legislators, instill in our public, that you do have a lot of authority as a board to make decisions that have anything to do with your district. And I think that's really difficult sometimes for some legislators that want to legislate from here. They understand local control, they understand the issue about how important it is for schools to do their job, but sometimes they can't help themselves and they want to tell you what to do. And I always say to them, I understand the issue. I understand what you want them to do, but you have to let boards make decisions. And sometimes, and I'll say this, sometimes you have to let boards make decisions that are popular within their community. And those are tough. When you're dealing with kids, it's always going to be gray area here and gray area there. And the laws are clear to a point, then you have to come into the superintendent and make some decisions that are difficult. But I challenge you to, visit with your legislators and talk to them about, what it means to be a board member and the decisions that you make. And legislators will tell me sometimes that they make difficult decisions, and I say, absolutely. You guys make tough decisions. So do board members. I have sat in on many a hearing that had to do with a student, a child. They might be disciplinary hearings. They might be hearings that deal with, IEP plans, those things. But those are sometimes tough. Really gut-wrenching decisions. And I say that's why they're elected. And the difference is that you are elected just like our governor's elected, just like our legislators are elected, just like our county folks are elected, and you have a job because you represent that constituency. That's different than what I do or Dr. Maher does, those kind of things. You are elected officials. And so I think you have a great clout, you have a good credibility to do that. And I think that's where the statute comes from. And I just want to say that because that establishes the basis for everything else that we do. You advocate for your kids. You are the sole source for setting the direction that you set. You have a plan in front of you that you try to implement. You're dealing with the achievement of your children. You're dealing with your public, and you have a big job to do. And I don't think really anybody who hasn't sat in your seat understands that, and where that goes, including administrators sometimes, including other people that are in the political world. So let's talk about outcome number one. I think we can all agree, tell me if I'm wrong, that the superintendent and the whole board needs to work as a team. I put this first and foremost because I really believe, and we emphasize this to our boards, that you can't operate in a vacuum. You're one individual as part of a group, including the superintendent. And so all of you need to function as a team and as best you can. That doesn't mean that you can't have knockdown, drag-out debates with each other. You can't ask questions. You can't, have differences of opinion. Those are good in a dialogue of a board and of any governing board to really get to truth, to really get to good decisions, to really make some sound and accurate decisions. But in the end, I think you need to function as a team. And sometimes when you see boards or city councils or even legislators that don't function as a team, there are people that stand outside of the group and think that they have greater decision-making power, greater authority than they have, and they don't. We as school board members are only one individual, and the power that we derive comes from each other. You have no individual decision-making power. So if we can decide on that, then the question becomes, so what do effective teams do? What do they actually do? And before you answer that question, we're going to come up with some characteristics of effective teams. I want to do an activity, and I know you're going to think this is weird, and it is, but we're going to get up and get into a circle and do an activity. Anybody in staff that wants to participate, you're welcome to do it. So if you do this, you don't need anything with you. We're going to go right behind Dr. Maher, and we're going to get into a big circle together. Come over here. Right where you are right here, let's get into a big circle. I brought my NFL football blue legs. You guys can come in. You want to put out that plus this page? It's even better than what we. Come on.
Come on.
This is good stuff. This is good stuff. So give yourself a look at a room. All we're going to do is we're going to toss the blue bag to someone else in the office. Okay? All right. So these are the rules. I'm going to take this blue bag and I'm going to toss it to somebody else. And then you're going to toss it to somebody else. And they're going to toss it to somebody else. All you have to do to play this game is remember who you toss it to and who you receive it from. Okay? So let me slow down. Okay. If I toss it to Todd like this, right, you caught it, and then what happens then is he gets a choice to toss it to anybody else he wants to. And after he tosses it, then he's going to put his hand up because he's already received, right? And so he's received and he's tossed it around. Now, I'll be the last person to receive it. So we'll look around and say we're going to put his hand up and he's never tossed it. So all you're going to do is catch it and toss it. When you both hand up, is you want to toss it to everybody. It's part of the teamwork. Let's try that again. Maybe the darts will go over there. I don't know. But let's try it again. So I'm going to toss it to Todd. Catches it. Toss it to the other person. His hand up. There you go. And then if you toss it to you, then you use it again. There you go. Okay. So now remember, we don't have that yet. That was the warm-up. Okay. Everybody, yeah.
Is teamwork up there? Is teamwork one of the words?
We're trying to figure this out. Let's try it one more time. Same person across the floor.
So you have to remember.
Same person. You put your hand down.
Hold on, so the first time you tossed it, it was so like the time you tossed it.
No.
Okay, great. So all I got to remember is, all I got to remember is that's the God and there's the God. That's all I got to remember. Okay? Is that it?
always gonna be a holiday.
Speed requirement.
There's no speed needed, no speed needed. There's no time.
But you can also only be holding one bag at a time, right? There's rules.
Nope, the speed possible. Dan, you were looking at us.
I'm watching Top. She's keeping track.
That's the last person out.
Oh, God. Oh, they almost died.
Okay, stop. But now, the last task is you have to go back. Okay, so what we see it, we go back. We go. No.
I'm sorry. Right. He did.
And sure, all the kids. I'm just gonna forget about it.
Oh, that all came at one time. I can't believe it.
Okay, stop. All right. So, when it comes to humor, kind of when you're doing it, so I think I'll so what happened at that in the first go was, if you notice, you could almost hear a rhythm catch, and then some people started to go, I'll go over because it was catching those changes, modification of it. What else happened is it's what do you do? You talk. Why do you talk? Yeah, you start running fast, you try to make sure that that is done, right? So you talk to what else?
We're focused. Everyone was looking
Very,
at the person.
very focused.
When you added more, then you stop looking at other people that make fun of them and drop it.
Right.
Right. Focus on the person.
Focus was key. What else? Right, you were watching the others so you could, you didn't have problems with it, so you watch. So, once you got it going, you learn how to talk to the that's great. What else? What else happened as a team? What else you see? And there's two things there. One was you trusted that the person was going to go, right? So you trusted them. And the other part was that you were making sure that your part was going to go, right? And it's so amazing. So you focus, the momentum, there was trust in there, the ability, what was happening, and did it bother you? Was there an increase in stress level the more food that was coming into the food?
For the first couple classes, but then it was that. We just knew that there was people.
Why? Why did that stress level not stay high? You knew the process, right? So you knew your purpose, you knew your task, you knew your goal, right? All you had to do was receive it and pass it. All you had to do. So you knew where you were going to go. What else did you do? Remind others, like, why did you do this task? Just a guy from the why did you do this thing? But why did you do the task? And there's spark the points that it is. If you didn't get to it, so I could have modified it down. But it's still stuck with the same amount. I think it's really, I think so too. So the story is actually celebrated that. I just feel a lot of that. What might be done better on the pastor? Celebrate. That is the accomplish something. Now, this is in the passage here. But if you want to celebrate it, you can say, hey, he doesn't. We put a lot of effort, a lot of work into feedback to this district, and we work together, we set our goals, we found a way to make those goals divided up that group, and we do things for both. And then the back, what's the celebration after that? So that was right, exactly.
We couldn't put together or let's say
But you still got so the focus, the task is clear, we have the goals, we need to mention, we respond, it's interesting, we ensure that other people are teach about new levels of people who
Yeah, the one time because you want to make sure the other person is safe definitely, but at the same time wants to come out. So at a moment we didn't have that, but hey.
So team work together in real ways. Schools, school set relationship. Many of us want to stop and say, oh, it's quality. So why did you want to what was your difference? Why was
for me it was you had to go. So this you all getting
so that was satisfaction. You felt satisfied with it. But the remakes, the kidding, the problems with all the writing and stuff, the satisfaction. Because the team was really good. Right. The satisfaction of it was high. So it's a team. Well, there was some relationship that we had, but we're also a little competitive. We didn't want to look at it, in terms of the and so we gave very different directions to try. What's going to do? How do I do this? I make sure that it's successful. Would you want to be successful as a group? Right. So you make sure that everybody has a success. So there was satisfaction, there was mentoring, because you need more. If I would have added 2 more, you'd be better. You figure out a way to do it. That's how we do it. Because I heard words like adjusting, somebody, we said, make sure I clean things up. So we'll adjust it as we go. Not every tax presents, and some of them are highly complex. So sometimes you have to adjust the middle of the tax to say, is it a if we were just, if I were just to hand off the hand, and then the card, and go, well, that probably would have been very easy. But going across this way, all of it across this way, so we're just on the tax. The tax you guys are excluded. There's some kind of difference. Now, does it bother you to make an adjustment? It's good. Does it bother you? When it's necessary. When is it necessary?
If it's a barrier, if there's something that's preventing the tax to move forward or to make a difference, then I think that's when we look at how we can use tax to make sure that that's part of that.
So try to read where it is going. What if you did this? And I want to see this right that's good. Let them make it. Let them do it. And would you happy that there's no justice? So as the tax increases, there will be no justice to the taxes. The state first. How difficult was it to switch to that? So why was it? Why was it? Why was it? How? The systems just work that way. You have a system. You order a system. But sometimes systems can change. And so we have to adjust. And the adjust is really pretty good. Most people do this really good. Some of the time to get it back. But what did you know about the tax? To get it possible. So all I have to do now is change the word on my head to say, okay, we used to feel the problem, now it's closed. And then we used to feel the problem, that's the old paragraph. But sometimes, especially in school, we have to make huge variances. And that takes time. And years you think about it, all you do is backwards. But in schools, they're not sure so good. It's systems in place. That's how it's done. And you can't step on that system sometimes. And so you shift that. You focus on how do you shift that? How do you make it? I took it towards you now, and I was sure why not? I had to say why not? And the thing is, the rest of the part too. If you can move in this direction, control it, move it this way, and then switch it, I got to figure out what is the super support that we can follow that she understands. And I understand that. What is your plan and follow it? It doesn't mean though that my view of the world is very different. Numerous variations of these. And so you can go in, well, you can also do this and this and this, and you can do this. So that's why I think it's important works to work as a team, but also there are some people that some of this board that think differently about that isn't always better. Because it makes the kind of system that has to do with the system. And if they're really not effective, and what this is, but one of the things that we do, and I think that people that's the moving momentum at that way. You appreciate each other because you trust it. You trust it to do that. There was a little bit of time when Todd was throwing a curveball and had affected you down to that curveball that we do and then bring that away to him and maybe do it. But that just happened on that. I was so Todd satisfaction. I just think all right. See, I saw that. I saw what's happening with that. None of this is new. The school boards, you have the students ask more questions. You have to get discussions. But at the end of the day, they have to say question. Is the team actually are we trusting each other? Are we thinking each other? Who's your high police aspect? These are decisions that I and so, the time is hard to do that to school. That was the most satisfaction because he said the best of the parts. And so, that growing, we have to get adjusted. Why do you figure that out? The second point is that we I can see that was great, but it wasn't as bad as or you can choose to do something else. I've seen that. So when you're doing the way that people are doing, and also you use the slide, is that you can go to the next. Oh my God, the whole thing does that. Because it's good. That's not fast. That was the direction.
I get it. So give me some characteristics of an effective team. What we just talked about a few of them. Just brainstorming this thing. What did you see? Characteristics of an effective team. What did you?
I think about that we have a strategic plan, so we come up with something, so we have a purpose, and every one of our meetings, our reports address something on that strategic plan. So I think that's something that we do effectively as administration in the school board.
Sure. So that plan as a board gives you purpose, right? It gives you direction and purpose, kind of like the task. You need the task where it's going. Does the plan give you any indication of roles and responsibilities of the school board? No. Okay. All right. And that's not a bad thing either. Because sometimes the plan is directed to say, now we have the administration to execute the plan. But what is your job with the plan as a board member?
We need to have consensus.
Right.
We need to agree that the strategic plan is what our purpose is.
Exactly. This is the direction we want to go. And every school, every board can have a different direction they want to go. But these are the 3 or 4 things we want to get done. And then we direct Dr. Maher to help us do that and go through that.
And accountability that we're following through with that strategic plan.
Right. You have to be accountable to yourself and your board, and you have to hold other people accountable. So purpose, I think, is one of them. What else do we see? What do effective boards do? Communication. Yeah, absolutely. You got to be talking to each other and trying to make sure that the team is working. we talked about the plan, giving the priorities, what we're doing. The roles, what is my task? What is my job? And we'll talk about that in just a second. What else did you see? What else do effective teams do?
You have on your conflict, and I think it's important to know it's okay, like you said, to have disagreements or conflict, but it's how you handle that conflict and come to a resolution with that conflict.
It is. If I don't handle it maturely and appropriately, then the conflict becomes a problem, and then we can't get done when we get done. So it's no different than if Karen and I have a disagreement about something, we've got to resolve the conflict before we can get to whatever the task is we want to do, and work with. So that's got to be resolved. And one of you mentioned that there can be barriers to a task, and one of them is conflict. Now, I think it's two kinds of conflict. One is constructive criticism, which some people can view as conflict, and other can be just barriers that people put up intentionally because we don't want to do it. It's too much work, that kind of stuff. Those can be other conflicts. But unless there are things that stop you from actually accomplishing the task, I think you can work through those. And yeah, conflicts can also be, personality issues. I just don't like the way he approaches this, or she approaches this, or I don't like her opinion about this, or his opinion about this. But I think you got to work through those conflicts to do that. Decisions, really, conflict is dealt with. And I put the word respectfully up here on purpose. Folks, I think that just goes without saying, but wow, I see this all the time in different groups I work with, that kind of stuff, that people are in conflict, they have disagreements, but at the end of the day, they might still have a very good relationship with each other. My wife and I, we get into conflicts sometimes, but we have a wonderful relationship because we work things out. But you don't have to be disagreeable to disagree in some cases. And so I put the word respectfully in there because I think that the norm of having to care about people in our team, I actually care about each other, and we said yes because we wanted the task to go. But I also don't want someone to look bad either. So I'm not going to say something in the boardroom that makes you look bad intentionally because I respect you. I have enough respect for you. Now, you may not necessarily, invite them over for Thanksgiving dinner, but at least you have a healthy respect for the individual and what they do. Personal traits. Everybody has unique personalities, and they bring different things to the table. I think this is important. I don't know if you do this or not, but certain groups and some boards have different kinds of norms. And they can be like very simple things, codes of conduct that they all agree to. We're going to come on time. We're going to have read our board packets. We're going to not make any kind of rash statements in the board meeting. We will have our questions answered as best we can. There are just certain kinds of protocols that people will follow. Now, you might have those just innately that you do because that's the culture of your board. And quite often that's the case. I know some people write them down, and that mostly I think is generated for new people to come in and say, look, that's not how we behave. That's not how we act. Boardrooms, classrooms, those kind of things, sometimes they just have to have certain norms and certain behaviors that people understand. I was telling Dr. Maher that every time I have a director's meeting with my staff, I have my agenda, and the bottom of the agenda are 5 or 6 things that I think these are just basic things that we all know, and we're going to follow this together. And also gives me the ability to hold someone else accountable and then hold me accountable as well. We don't have our cell phones on and we're doing emails when we have our director meetings going on. We don't do that because we want to make sure that we're all engaged and we're on task. And I use those words. We're engaged and we're working together and we're solving problems. And they're basic things. And you would think to yourself, I get frustrated because I think people should know these things, right? Well, the same thing happens in the classroom. There are children that don't understand, basic ways of behavior in a classroom, so we teach them that. Some schools use Boys Town training, others use other social skills training. And you would think to yourself, I shouldn't have to teach a child how to sit still. Now you do, because some kids don't know how to do that. The same thing can happen with the board. And I don't mean to give the sense that you don't function correctly, but I think you have to have a sense of the culture you live in and the kinds of things you expect from one another. And then hold each other accountable for that. I remember one time I'm in my director's meeting, I'm sitting there, my phone goes off, I've got it on silent, my phone goes off, and we're having a pretty intense conversation. And one of my directors said, Dr. Fogan, are you with us? And it was just this subtle, that's not our culture. And I just glanced at the phone real quick. And I didn't get defensive about it. He was right. I just ventured off over here for a ways. I wasn't engaged with the group. And I am glad he held me accountable for that. I am glad that Norm was a part of the group in what we had. So if you have those kinds of issues, it's not uncommon for a board to have that discussion. Just say, you know what, it kind of bothers me that we have this, but this doesn't happen. Can we all agree on that? If you can't agree on it, then it is annoying. But teams have those norms. They find efficient and productive ways of working together, like you did. I'm going to take the beanbag under because we keep getting hit when it goes high. So I'm going to go under there, and that's more effective, more productive. In your case, you might find ways to become more efficient as a board member too. Last two, success when the team is met with success, that's that high satisfaction. Effective teams, even if they are perceived to be dysfunctional because they may have conflict, they may have disagreements, effective teams always have high satisfaction because they get something done. And if you've ever had a situation, maybe not at your board meeting, but ever had a task that just never ends. It just keeps going. And no one really takes the ball. No one really wants to solve it. It's one of those just out there. And the more the task gets put off, or the more the task doesn't have leadership to it, or the more the task doesn't have a purpose to it, you get frustrated. Why? Because the team isn't working together to solve it. Either it isn't part of the priority, it isn't part of the purpose, it isn't part of what we do, I don't know my role. That's where teams fall off the wagon, is that when their roles and say, this is my job, someone else should be doing that job. Okay, well, if they're not doing the job and you're not doing the job, the task sits there, doesn't get done. So I don't know what I'm supposed to do at this point. And I know in my office, we have a task that's ongoing, and I need to take ownership of that task and make sure that it comes to a completion, because we're not at a high satisfaction level of that task. It's just hanging there. But it's a tough task, and someone needs to take charge of it, and we need to get it solved and do that. That's what leadership is all about too. Training and those are pieces. But you saw all of those characteristics in the activity that we had. And so you might make a note to yourself and say, Wade's right, we have all these pieces. This might be one we want to work on as a group. And look at and say, we're not really sure about our role. We don't know our purpose. I bet we do. But there might be one or two there. The other part that I would suggest is the whole underpinning to all of this is trust. I know situations where people that work with each other just don't trust each other. There's whatever the conflict is, that they just do not trust each other, and that's just an environment where you're not going to have completion of a task. You're not going to have high satisfaction, and it actually breeds a kind of a contempt in the team. Now, there are things though that happen that create mistrust with each other. So we want to try to avoid those things, and if it happens, then we need to address it. I mess up sometimes at home, and my wife is not happy about it, and we've got a conflict, and we need to address that and take care of it. Sometimes I just want to be mad for a while. I don't want to address it. She wants to take care of it now. I don't want to take care of it now. But at some point, we need to address it, because if we don't, then I always say that I have a tank, and it's built up this trust with my wife. And sometimes I do stupid things, and that tank goes down. So I got to rebuild the trust again a little bit more. And that's in any relationship that you have. How much trust do you have in the tank? And I will share this with you, that when we were talking about this topic at our pre-meeting, a couple of you said we have a great deal of trust in Dr. Martin. And I think that's true. I can see that in the activities you have with your board and where you go. And sometimes boards begin to ask questions about the superintendent, and when those questions begin to come, then it's not just a matter of we don't trust them, we just have questions. Well, if I'm questioning things, then you got to do something to build that trust again. And so I'm not going to ask you the question, do you trust each other? But I think we should think about that in terms of how do we act as a team. Now, when we were throwing the beanbag back and forth, we had a lot of trust. I knew exactly, I trusted Carly Missy. She was going to throw that beanbag. It was going to be thrown hard enough I could catch it. I didn't have to worry about that. I was waiting for the beanbag to come, and she would kind of look at the beanbag, she'd look at me, she'd throw the beanbag. I had a lot of trust that Carly was going to get me that beanbag and what was going to happen. The question then becomes, how much trust do you have with each other? Because when you get to a point where you've got to make a tough decision, and you're at a hearing of some kind, and you're going to be talking with each other, you've got a significant task to accomplish. But if I don't trust my colleague on some things, now we have noise. We have noise, and we can't accomplish the task because there's noise in the way all the time. And so we've got to make sure that we leave it at that. So what are some strategies? Oh, by the way, I'll tell you, there's a great article. If you go back to your supplemental reading, there's a really good article in there that talks about the real crisis, and it's 8 ways to beat the real crisis. David Horsager is the CEO of an organization that actually teaches people about trust in organizations. That's one of the things he does. He's an outstanding speaker. I heard him last summer speak, and he really gives you some good things to talk about. It's a neat article about the research they've done on trust and where that comes from. So how do you do it? How do you build trust with people? Not just in a board, but your relationship, your dealings with other folks. How do you build trust with them? What do you do?
Shared experiences.
What does that mean, Carly? Shared experiences.
Well, like the more board meetings that you have with your whole group, you learn to expect that certain people are going to say certain things, or they're going to make, a certain type of a comment, or they're not going to. And so I think just the pattern of behavior, you kind of pick that up. Just relationships, like maybe if your child goes to the same school as them, or they have a class with them, you have another shared experience where you have something else to talk about, and something else that you have in common, I think just helps you to find that similarity. And then you feel like, oh, we're similar people in values or in ideas or thoughts or experiences, and then you trust people because of that.
Would you say that it's true that people tend to trust other people that are somewhat like them? Yeah, generally? Yeah, okay. So you find commonality with people, that you have a common experience here on the board, but you come from different backgrounds and different relationships, so you try to find commonality. Great, what else do you do? What are some ways to build trust?
I think for me, sometimes I've built more trust when I've maybe disagreed with someone, because we've learned how we're going to handle that and know that we can get through that as well. Like we might have disagreed on a certain policy or something within the board atmosphere, and just knowing you can get through that the first time, because none of us are like best friends outside this boardroom and know each other that way, in that manner. So just knowing how you're going to deal with that conflict and go, oh, okay, we weathered that, we can get through that, and how to adjust to that. So,
and you create a norm there that you might just agree to disagree.
Exactly.
But you're disagreeable.
And and we can still work together, and and have other things that we will work together on.
Until you get home and post it on Facebook.
Exactly.
No, I hear you. Yeah, but you establish a relationship enough with the person to know the pattern, how they're going to act. But you also know that if we disagree, it'll be okay. Okay. You trust them. What else can we do to build trust? Do what you say you're going to do. Right. If I tell you I'm going to be here at 1 o'clock, you just expect that I'm going to be here at 1 o'clock. If I show up at 2, and you're going, okay, I'll forgive him once, but then I show up late again, and maybe I don't show up or don't call you. I don't get done what you want me to do. So in addition to doing it, you're setting an expectation of what I should be doing. And if I don't, then you don't trust me. Yeah. Yes. No hard, fast rules for this. How else do you build trust? Think of it.
It says board members and superintendent, maybe I'll lay in.
Please.
I think one way we do it is meet with every board member, every individual. And it's shared experience, colleagues, gives us an opportunity.
How does that build trust between you and the board member?
Well,
what does it do? You talk to them.
Familiarity either breeds contempt or compassion.
Right.
Yes. So far, I would say it's been compassion and empathy, or at least an understanding of the issues and the roles.
Yeah.
You know there's going to be a time that they ask questions. It's more of an easier setting.
Yeah.
So, hey, how come they're doing this? Or why aren't we doing this? We know.
Have you ever known someone who, maybe not the board setting, but someone who has kind of a peculiarity about something they do, and you just don't understand, why is he like that? Why does he do what he does?
We use heat.
It's just a generic masculine term, but are you a little sensitive about those terms? Token. Or she. Have you ever had someone who just has a peculiar behavior, and until you get to know them and understand why they are like that, then you're kind of like, I'm a little standoffish. I don't know why you're doing that. But once I get to know them, I might think, oh no, it's not a threat. It's not harmful to me. So we're a little bit standoffish in people that, and we don't trust people that we don't understand. And we use that word. But the more they can understand the issue, or the more you guys can come to an agreement on something, or just informing them.
We also know that I'm not giving one board member information. I'm not giving another board member. An accountability on my communication to the board.
Sure.
I think as well.
Right.
So if they don't all get it at the same time, they continue to.
Right.
They're all
Of course.
the same information.
Yep. Yep.
Too, it helps just, it helps that relationship. Not only are we getting information about what's going on in the district, but it gives us the opportunity to get to know each other a little bit more. So, Dr. Munger understands my perspective. Got a middle school student and a high school student. So my perspectives are changing from the elementary school. So, it's just, it's an opportunity to just get to know each other.
Yeah.
Even after 5 years.
And continue.
Right.
There's no growth.
Right.
And we're elected officials, so it gives us a chance as a funnel to direct information we're hearing from our voting body to look to back to.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Do you do things overtly that build trust with your community?
I try to. I have my personal cell phone, so that I feel like I'm accessible if people want to. And I think all of us, but I'll have all that information and try to respond in a timely fashion to them. Usually a lot of times we're going to be directing them to the district because they probably have more than the answer and so forth, or can help with the solution if there needs to be a solution and so forth. But we're kind of the first point of contact because I think they feel that since they elected us, that's their person they can reach out to.
I found it really interesting, and I think it's a symbolic, but also practical way of trust. When I was studying your website, I was going on looking at the things. I clicked on the board, and I was looking at your agendas, that kind of stuff. And I saw all of your pictures up there, and your phone numbers are right underneath it. And I thought symbolically, that is, not a lot of boards do that. They might at best share an email, but are those your home phone numbers that are on there? Cell numbers? So people can go on there and find your personal cell phone, and they're right there with you right there. See, that I think is, there's some risk in that, obviously, but I think that also demonstrates to the public that we're open. I'll put my cell phone right out there for you to look at. And to me, symbolically, that's an issue of trust too. The one topic I would add to this discussion is honesty. Just being honest with people, and we can disagree on some stuff, but I'm just going to be open with you. I'm going to tell you ahead of time, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be honest with my remarks, and so I'm not going to say something outside of the board meeting that I wouldn't say in the board meeting. I'm not going to put something on Facebook that I wouldn't tell you already. So I'm transparent. You can just see who I am and where I am, at least on my policy decisions, that kind of stuff. But and then I always say, if I mess up, I have to be accountable for that, and I have to say I'm sorry. I mean, that is a critical part of honesty, I think, and I do. I mean, there are times, you know, I will tell you this one story, and it's fine if it's being taped, but I was working with a legislator, and we put a bill together, and I hadn't informed him about it ahead of time, which is kind of the norm of what we would do, and he was really mad at me about that, and I thought, oh shoot, I messed up. I should have told him about it. I should have been forward. I wasn't trying to be deceptive and that kind of stuff. He was really angry with me. And so I saw him on the floor of the Senate, and I went up to him and I said, you know, I would never do that to you intentionally, and that wasn't me. I'm sorry about that. And he was a young legislator at the time, and you know, that really sparked our relationship even better. Because you know, my trust tank was empty at that point because he didn't trust me in doing that. But we slowly over time got to know each other. We talked more. You know, we go out and have dinner at La Minestra or something. And I knew I had to rebuild the trust level with him and do that because I messed up after doing that. And so over time, we really worked well together on that. Now, in the back of his mind, though, he's always thinking, can I trust Wade? Because we had that one time, you know, and so it all depends on what kind of an elephant memory you have about that and where that is. But honesty, I think, is important. Lead by example, communicate openly, know each other personally. Don't place blame. We didn't talk about that one, but there's just no place for blame in doing that. You can make decisions, but don't blame. Discourage clicks, discuss trust issues, and I think, above all, you need to have that dynamic relationship as you do with your superintendent. Without that, it just and I work with some boards that are having that struggle. And they say the superintendent won't do this and this, and this is the problem, and that's the problem. And I sit down with them and I say, wait a minute. Are you sure it's a superintendent? I mean, there are trust issues I see here, but are you sure it's a superintendent? Well, I don't know. We don't get along with each other. Okay, let's start there. And so sometimes we get back to the real root cause of the issue, and that's we just don't get along. We don't trust each other. Okay, let's talk about your role. And I'm going to run out of time so quick. It's just crazy. But let's talk about your role just a little bit. What's your role as a board member in the Sioux Falls system? The job of a 2-year-old is to rule the universe. That we know for sure. And so I'm going to ask you what your job is. By the way, that's my granddaughter, Nora. She's a 2-year-old, and she does rule the universe, and she tells me that. But she loves her sunglasses and her little bow. But what is your role, and what do you do? So I want to play this video from Wayne Gibson. He's a guy that is giving advice to a new school board member, and I just love the way he boots this up. It's kind of funny. It's real short. Oh, not that one.
Not that one.
Let's get that. Let's go back to this thing.
Sometimes they don't show them.
Advice that I'd give to a new board member: if you got on the school board for any other reason than to promote student achievement and accomplishment, get over it. If you have ulterior motives, thinking that you can come in and change the board or the school district, get over it. It won't happen because you're only one vote. Get on board, realize that you're there for the children, and if not, you need to find another place to be.
It's just so to the point.
Short and sweet.
I love Wayne in doing that. I want to show you one video here that we have. It's about trust. Yeah.
We're going to ask you to fall, and then they will catch you. So you have to trust us. I'm going to count to 3. Just relax and fall. Okay? 1, 2, 3. No, wait, no! 3. No, wait, no!
I love that video because the directions were clear. He was going to be, they were catching him, but he didn't know which way to fall. And that would hurt your trust chances from doing that again, I suppose, if you did that. Okay. So let's talk about governance and what that means. And I want to bring an activity up here. This, I think, is just a key concept to learn. And I believe that you know this, but it's hard when you're in situations to remember that you serve all 3 branches at the same time. The legislature serves the policy branch, the governor serves the executive branch, and the Supreme Court serves the judicial branch. You as a board member have all 3 of those together. And the reason that's important is that sometimes your role intermingles with these kinds of things. So if you want to be responsive to the community, but sometimes you're going to have to hold a hearing and be an impartial juror, in some cases, but you've already been corrupted with information from somebody else that maybe wanted to just get your ear about this particular topic. You're supposed to be impartial with this. And then the executive idea is your job is to hire and evaluate the superintendent, not to hire the principal, not to hire the teacher, those kind of things. And it's hard to sometimes stay in our lane and then also develop policies. And what I found, though, is that there's a high degree of satisfaction of boards that understand this. My job is to make sure our district is running well, not run the district. And my job is to make sure that I hire the best superintendent I can to run the district. And my job is to make sure that we are judicious in our policies and how we make decisions about those policies. If I can do just that, and by the way, that is a lot, stay there. Because once you start throwing the beanbag around different places, you've lost sight of the team, you've lost sight of your role and where you are. So let me ask you this. I'm going to run some what would you do questions by you, and we'll have a few minutes to talk about these. A parent you know well calls with concerns, and they're emotional about the situation. It appears his or her student is in conflict with the teacher, and I guess some disciplinary action has already taken place, probably in the classroom. The parent disagrees with the actions of the teacher, and I threw this one in there too. You don't particularly like the teacher in question yourself. The parent asks for help and wants you to look into it. There's a lot of things going on in there, but what would you do? Now remember, you know them well, okay? Probably a friend of yours called you up, your phone number's on the website, called you up and said, I need you to look into this one. I need you to help me out with this. What do you do?
Send them to the principal.
You send the principal.
Well, what I would do is obviously show some compassion and say, I understand you're upset. My recommendation would be to you to go and speak if you don't like what's going on with the student's teacher and you've tried to resolve that already with the teacher, then go to the principal next.
So you jump to the principal because you already know that the teacher, going back to the teacher, is probably not going to get some kind of resolution that's made. You don't know that. But.
I guess I was making the assumption they had already tried to
you could ask
work
them
something out with the teacher.
Yeah, okay. But Kate, you're not gonna look into it? You're not gonna call the principal up and say, hey,
Wait, I've been on the board a long time.
yeah, okay, all right.
I've learned my lesson.
Would others do something different? Kate, let me ask you one more question. This is someone you know well, okay? You have a relationship with them, they've asked you for help. Now you have a struggle because you have to balance your board hat and your friend hat in both of those.
I would tell them that I've got to wear my board, if you're coming to me as a board member, I'm putting my board hat on.
Is it hard?
No.
No?
I mean, just like when I walk in my kid's school, I've got my parent hat on.
Sure.
I don't hold my kid.
Sure.
I'm able to compartmentalize.
And you can separate those roles.
For the people to understand that,
Well, yeah.
that you're dealing with.
Right.
I think as a parent,
Right.
it becomes a little easier to do that.
What other advice would you give in this scenario? Anything else you saw there?
I think that is harder to do as a new board member because you feel like you want to save the world. And so people come to you because they probably, helped you get elected and they, like they have these maybe false conceptions about what you can do. And
Yeah.
so I think it's important to be like the educator in that
Yep.
position and say, I'd really like to help you. If what you're saying is true and it gets to be a bigger deal than what this is, if it were to actually come to the board, I can't then participate in any sort of anything that has to do with it because
Right.
now I know too much. And so I think when you tell people that, then they're like, oh, okay, I get it a lot of times,
Yeah.
But they don't understand. Just like as a new board member, I didn't understand, oh, that's how that works, And so you do get, hey, can you have coffee with me? Hey, can you go to a volleyball game, you go to a track meet, you go to something and somebody wants to talk to you and it's, you don't want to be rude and walk away, but you also don't want to sit and listen to the
Right.
entire story because you don't know what the future holds for that specific situation.
I always remind boards that if you jump into that, if you take that bait and you jump into that, you're jeopardizing yourself here. Because what happens if that friend of yours' child ends up in a judicial hearing, in a disciplinary hearing? Now, you really are the board member at that point, and you have to be as impartial as you can. And so if you can't, then now you've got to excuse yourself out of there. Now you're not part of the team. Now it just unravels at that point. Now the beanbag is being thrown everywhere. And so it's a real cautionary measure to do that. But I recognize that sometimes these can be gut-wrenching because these are people that probably voted for you, your friends, that kind of stuff, and now you have to serve a different role in this. But great point, though, you need to educate them on that. But sometimes they will understand that. They'll say, well, I thought we were friends, and not anymore, so I'm gonna unfriend you on Facebook. But that's tough. That's really tough.
I think it's also important for parents in general to realize that they should always be their child's advocate. And that doesn't mean that their child's never wrong or that they're never wrong, but it means that if they have a concern, the best thing they can do is to be that child's advocate and go speak with that person, whether it's the teacher or the principal or whoever that is. And so making them feel like they're empowered to do so, again, respectfully, don't go in and demand things, but maybe they're not understanding the full picture. And so I think it's important to do that at any time, not expect that somebody else is going to be the one that's always the advocate for your child. Like that's your responsibility too.
Right, absolutely. But you got to send them back to the problem closest to the child. Maybe the teacher, maybe the principal, but you have to, this is a good schematic. The complainant goes to the authority closest to the problem, probably the teacher first. And they might say, I've talked to that teacher, they won't listen. Okay, then go to the supervisor or the principal and do that. And they're going to want to circumvent this process though, because it takes work and time, and they just want this resolved, and sometimes they give up in frustration. So you have to kind of coach them to do that a little bit. But that's one of them. Last, listen, acknowledge, send the correct person, thank them, and then move on. One of your board members wants to be sure that the selection of the next high school principal is done correctly, and asks the superintendent for copies of all applications he or she also asks to be able to sit in on the interviews. What do you see there? There's several problems within that. What's one of them?
You don't hire staff.
You don't hire staff members. That's not your lane. That is not your task to do. Well, why is that? What's wrong with sitting on the principal?
They don't report to us.
Right.
And we hire him and tell them what we want to do, and he then needs to do them to hire himself.
Exactly. You are not the superintendent. So if you do your job, the team works well. You're throwing the beanbag in the right place. If you step out of that role, though, and do this, then you got problems. What else do you see in there that's a problem? What's the motivation or what's lacking here?
The board member thinks they're going to get cut out.
Right. So there's maybe a competence trust issue with the superintendent, maybe. Well, you can't do it, so I can do it better. I'll step in. I'll fix it for you. I'll help you with that. Why is that a problem?
Trust the superintendent.
You do. And if you don't, then you need to approach it, and you need to rectify it. Now, are there times when you can't trust superintendent? I hope not. But if those times are there, they're not here. But if those times were to happen, then you need to have those conversations, and they're tough conversations. But you've got to have them. Yeah, there's a trust issue here. Wants to be sure the selection is done correctly. And that's really saying, I don't trust that he's going to get the job done, so I'll sit there and do it. But, you know, sometimes to a degree, there are board members who have expertise. You know, there might be a situation where, you know, you're building Jefferson and you got a board member, I'm making this up. If you're building Jefferson, there's a board member that's maybe a construction person, knows a lot about construction, architecture. They might want to get their hands involved in that because of their background, their expertise. What would you do there? I mean, how do you acknowledge their expertise, but yet keep them in their lane? How do you do that?
So I work in the insurance business.
Sure.
I have not once touched the insurance people.
Yep.
Because it's not an appropriate place for me to be.
Right.
Other than the fact that there are competing systems, you know, in Sioux Falls or in South Dakota, I know I'm going to get it. So.
Spar with me just a little bit, okay? So you have insurance knowledge. You understand insurance. When would it be appropriate, though, to use that knowledge in your setting here?
I guess I would, I don't know what I would do.
Yeah.
I'm going to just offer a whole different perspective, and that coming from looking at how to select a particular committee. And if there are times where we will intentionally pick an individual, given their skill set, and it's an invitation as opposed to them to send around and saying, here's my credentials, and I'm going to correctly make sure this is done. So it's the dynamic and how it's come across and how the group is formed is important.
As long as we understand, I think, our role in that committee, because Kate's right. I mean, if she's on the insurance committee, that had a whole new dynamic to it because of her role, the position, and the knowledge. Now, that doesn't mean, though, that if there was an insurance question, that she just absolutely has to abstain from all knowledge of insurance. I mean, she could bring that into the board discussion. She might even tell Dr. Maher, you know, I'm seeing the committee say this and this and this. I need to clarify that because of my background and my knowledge. So she could actually add to the conversation. Now, she's not saying, I disagree with the committee because I know better, but she can add her wisdom to that knowledge. So I'm not saying you shouldn't use your talents that you have of being a board member because you bring skills out. But sometimes it's hard. Responsibility for student achievement. I'm going to skip ahead to, well, just a couple of these. I want to emphasize two of them. You got to believe that you're here because of the children. I mean, that people say that, but I don't know if they always believe it. Yeah, we're here for the kids. Okay. Do you ever talk about student achievement? No. Do you ever talk about anything other than football scores? No. are you here for the kids? You have to really look at your actions, at least in some boards I've talked to, in doing that. Participate responsibly, come to meetings on time, be prepared. I mean, those are trust building things too, that my colleagues are prepared and willing to contribute. Remember that the only authority you have lies in the whole board, not in you individually. So don't go out and say, I'll take care of that for you, because you can't. It's only one board. Be responsible for your behavior in the group, be a good listener, refrain from involvement in teacher personnel issues, review the facts, and then understand where you are, public support, and then the board governs and administrators administer. Let them administer. We've got great administrators, let them administer sometimes, and then support decisions. This is the tough one for some board members. You know, we've had knockdown, drag out debate about some issue, and I just don't agree with it. And so, but I was outvoted 4-1, and I have a choice to make now. I can either be mad about it, and I can act on that anger, or I can accept it and say, I'm a part of a team, this is how we made the decision, I can accept it. And if you can't, then you got some choices to make at that point. But the worst thing I think boards do is then, leave the board meeting and then talk about their dissatisfaction with it sometimes. But that's hard, I know, because you've made a decision. All right, after 2 board meetings of discussion related to redistricting and boundary changes, a coworker asks to see you. He or she lives in a part of town that could change the elementary school boundaries where their children go to school. He or she wants to give you their opinion about the potential boundary change and the impact it will have on their family. Okay, coworker, put yourself in that environment. They haven't asked you anything other than to meet with you and see you. The discussion is difficult. Boundary changes are always tough discussions to go through because you're affecting, people where they go to school, where their homes are. What do you do in that case? Todd, what would you do?
On Monday, when this happened, I always welcome any input at the public hearing. There'll be plenty of opportunity for everyone to hear what you have to say instead of just me trying to hear it for credit. There'll be ample opportunity to voice your opinion, but me individually, it's not something.
So you would invite them to the board meeting to express their opinion of all your teammates, and not just you.
Yep.
Okay. It's a coworker though. They might say, Todd, I just want to talk to you about it. No big deal. Come on. You okay with sending them to the board meeting? You bet. Okay. Others. What do you think, man?
My listen, that's part of my constituencies. The coworker is looking at this.
Yep. Yep. You haven't committed to anything, right? You haven't said, sure, whatever you think. Yeah, we'll make sure that we'll gerrymander that road by 10th Street so that your house is, you haven't given them anything. You
Well,
just,
also, if it's a coworker, so if this is during your work hours, you might want to also think about if it's appropriate time to have that conversation.
I hadn't thought about that.
Or
Yeah.
not a convo, but listen.
Yeah, good. Others.
I think it's important just to make sure they know what the process is, because I think we probably all have people think about this already.
Of course.
I had someone say, I heard that I live here now and it's going to be in this school district. We haven't even set our calendar timeline. And so I just simply said, no decisions have been made. There's going to be ample community discussion on this. And just kind of went through the process that we've gone through so far and explain that to people. Oh, okay, I didn't realize that we weren't even at the decision-making process.
Do you find yourself explaining to people, the protocols and the right chain of command and what we're going to do with redistricting, and because they may not know or they might not be aware of the process. Do you find yourself doing that a lot?
Yeah. I can't even remember where it was. I think it was at NSK PTA, not last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I remember going to a session where, maybe we haven't done this, it's been, I'm foggy, but they would have YouTube little things with their school board members just explaining, periodically they would post it up on Facebook or on their website and just have a, brief kind of education on this is what a meeting looks like. This is why we have a consent agenda, or this is what our community discussions are for, and just help sort of explain. Because I think we spend a lot of time explaining the process. Like you said, the chain of command. Who do you go to if you have a complaint? At least I'm having that experience.
Just want to make sure they know they have the opportunity to be heard.
Right. And that
But I love the
maybe,
idea of having, little things up on, online that the school district is using their school board members for.
sure,
I direct a lot of people to the website. Like people ask me, we get the most random questions, and I'm like, "Oh, do you have the app? Let me show you how to find that on the app." Or if it's at work, I'm like, "Hey, pull up the school district website," and I'm like, "Google Sioux Falls School District."
Yep.
There's your start, and then I'll walk
there's
them
videos
through.
there, there's information there.
Yeah, the number of people who don't use the resources that are just at their fingertips.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes just showing them that it really is pretty quick will help them. Look, you can find the minutes to the meetings that we've already had, or you can find the next upcoming dates, put them on your calendar, can you attend? So things like that, again, explaining the process and showing them where they can get the information and trying to make them maybe a little bit more independent on it, I think is helpful too.
Do you think, man, let me ask you this question. You set up a meeting and a time to visit with your coworker because you just want to listen. Do you set up any boundaries with them about what listening means at that point? Because you don't
Set up
know.
boundaries for what?
Yeah, okay, I'm willing to meet with you as long as you're just giving me input on this, because I can't respond to you about it. I can't, give you a response back. You just set up some boundaries about the discussion. Would that be helpful?
I would say how much time that I would have to give to it if we just want to be heard. But then layered on top of that, if we have a process in place, we know what that process is. And then these listening sessions we do, so that their voice would ultimately be heard within that process.
Yeah, okay.
I think something I do too often is say, I'm only one voice. I sit on a board with 4 other people. No decisions have been made, or something to that effect, just to make sure that they know, I'm not the ultimate decision maker, that we are together the decision makers.
Do you think they understand that for the most part?
For the most part.
I've also walked through the process of even if they want to speak at our meetings, because I think that can be intimidating to people to have to come.
Oh, sure.
And so, I'll say, like when you said, why don't you come to me, that I'll walk through that process with them, what they need to do, when they need to show up and sign in with them, so that hopefully some of those barriers of that fear of coming and do that are removed so that they can come and make their question.
That was after what you had said. I think at one point we talked about doing a little snippet somewhere of how to come in. Yeah.
Make it less intimidating.
Do we have time for one more? What would you do? Okay. Let's see. Let me just move ahead here. This is an easy one. After a cyber attack on the school district's internet system, and it's been thwarted, it didn't have any damage, but it becomes clear to the school board that the district's policy on staff and student internet use is weak and could jeopardize the system if such a security breach should happen again. What do you do? What is your role in that?
Board policy is within realm of the 3 circles, and so that would be something we would need to go back. And in our board, we have 2 board members who sit on the policy committee with administration. And that we would be directing them to reevaluate, but that probably is that.
Right. Yeah. That's a big part of what you folks do, and we have systems for you if you need help with that. Let me just fast forward through a couple of these here. We have 410 sample board policies on our website that are accessible to you for nothing. You can use them, adapt them, modify them, ignore them, whatever you want to do. But if you need help with that, or your administrators do, we cover all of these topics, and you can get some help from us if you need to. Gary Kaufman, my legal counsel, runs that. We also send out, you probably heard of Tyler Pickner. Tyler's my communication director, and he sends out policy alerts. And I would strongly urge you to pay attention to policy alerts, because what we're looking for in our office all the time are updates, like legislative updates, something changed in the legislature, we want to update a policy, or we're looking for new and emerging policies, cybersecurity, something like that, or other kinds of things that we're hearing about other policies, and we create one. We just created one like for the Noxaline project, the Narcan project, we created one for that to look at. So if you see those, take a look at them and say, do we have a policy like that? Do we need a policy like that? Obviously, Dr. Maha will be looking at some of those. And then we can help you with consultation on the phone. Okay, one last one. The board president calls for a motion to enter into executive session, specifically citing STCL 125.2 subsection 1, which is discuss the qualifications, competence, performance, characteristics, or fitness of any public officer or employee or prospective public officer or employee. So after the discussion with this particular personnel matter, one of the board members says, I quote, "Since we're in executive session, we should talk about the problem with the football team and the coach." What would you do in that situation? So you resolved the issue that you went into executive session for, the personnel issue. And the superintendent presented that, you discussed it, and no action was required to have you come out and then act on it. But inside of the executive session, someone said, since we're here, let's talk about this. What would you do? Yeah?
Probably ask if it's on the agenda.
Let's say it wasn't on the agenda. It's just something that's been on the school board member's mind, and they just want to talk about it, but we're in executive session, so what's wrong with that?
Well, so technically, it is a personnel issue, so it falls within the law, right? However, it's not a planned conversation where somebody could have prepared and had both sides of whatever said issue is be represented in a fair way.
Right.
So
Right.
then that's the piece of it to me that makes it inappropriate. But if it's a personnel issue and that is the reason that you went into exec session, a personnel issue is fair game, but it should be fairly presented on behalf of the employee or.
And it hasn't followed the chain of command, too, I would argue, because
Right.
that doesn't vet into.
Your superintendent has been surprised
Yeah.
at this point.
Sure.
And like you, none of us like surprises. There's no room for surprises. So in this case, even though you're right, it could be construed to fall under subsection 1. And maybe we have a personal issue here, I don't know. But all of a sudden it was just sprung on the superintendent, sprung on the board. And in that case, it would be inappropriate. Now, could you do it technically? Maybe, but you're really in shaky ground here, because this wasn't part of the original plan. This wasn't on the agenda. And so I guess my point is, don't use executive session, as you well know, just to talk about stuff you want to talk about. Even if, I made it this way on purpose, even if it is a topic that would be acceptable for the reason you went into executive session. But yeah, you would want to say to the superintendent, stop, let's figure out, is there really a problem here to start with? We don't need an executive session to decide that. And then let's back up a little bit and figure out what we're doing. Okay? All right, and then in your book, you have all the executive session information that we have there. I'm out of time.
Yeah, 5 more minutes.
Okay, last one, I promise. I said last one 3 times ago. Last one. A controversy over personnel has blown up on social media. It's out there. The superintendent asked the board president to call for a meeting in executive session to inform the board about the issue and provide facts countered the misinformation in the public. All protocols for organizing the meeting are followed. Everything's legit for getting together and having executive session for this conversation. It's a tense situation, but the board is well informed by the end of the meeting. You know exactly what's going on. No action is necessary, and the board president closes the meeting, you're done. You leave IPC, and a media representative calls you and wants to know your opinion about the matter. Now, you're torn because you want to set the record straight. There's all kinds of misinformation out there, so you want to set the record straight. At the same time, you've been told by some guy that you shouldn't talk about executive session outside of the executive session. What do? You got a dilemma here that tears you both ways. What would you do? Why?
If it's a personnel issue, and if there's clarification that needs to be made in the media, whether it's his office's responsibility to address it.
And I bet you have pretty good systems in place that take care of those kind of situations.
If it's felt necessary to set the record straight.
Right, yep. So the question you're always asking is, what's my job? Am I the spokesperson for the board to talk to the media about an executive session or discussion that we have? No. Is it my job to set social media straight about something that I have new information about now? No. Is it the administration's job to take the media issue and work on that separately? Yes, in that case. But those are tough because you know how it is. You had media that ask you questions, and they're selling papers, and they're making news shows, so they want information. You have critical information. And like I said in the beginning, this is blown up on social media. It's out there. And so now we're having to recover and figure out how do we bring all this information back in what we do. But again, just like the beanbags, stay in your lane, do your job, we're good. I hope this is helpful. I hope we've had you think a little bit about some topics. I hope that, and I'm pretty sure, that we've reaffirmed some things you already know, and some things that you are doing as a board already. And it's been a great privilege to be here, to be with you. If our office can ever do anything to help you folks in any way, we're here to help you. So thanks for having me, and it's good to be here.
Wade, you did wonderful. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on. Board committee reports. Board members.
Nothing new on budget since the last meeting. The Sports Authority, we have the marathon this weekend. It's a little bit lighter than we've had in the past, but there's a lot of other things, and there's so much more being offered in Sioux Falls. There's more to do. And then I met with Sherry Unruh from, Shelly Unruh, and that was a really, really good meeting, and she's asked me to help her form a board for housing, and for 2 years to accomplish a pretty big task, but there's some big issues, and I think my perspective as a board member and as a real estate broker would be invaluable, and she's got a great list of some names, and I think this will be a real powerful working board, and not just one where you stop in once a month and make a vote. So I'm really, really fired up about that. It's changes. That's
Chamber, we had a meeting. They're still working on the hiring of the new executive director, Jason Ball, leading. They were thinking October, I think, is about right. And the CVB gave their budget because they have to go through some city projects. So they were doing that. Let's see, they had today, Dr. Maher and I both attended, Senator Thune had a round table and then kind of opened the questions. They had it was a nicely attended event today as well. JDAI, I attended a meeting in Chamberlain on that. It was interesting. Mitchell and Watertown are both doing some interesting new partnerships with their community on truancy and using some outside resources outside the district. Do that, have a report on that. Sioux Empire Leadership. Kate and I attended that first meeting, passed the bylaws, working forward on that agenda, setting up some rules and kind of how to bring new things forward. The mayor spoke a lot about on the census, which will be very impactful to us as well, on making sure everybody gets counted, because that's how obviously dollars are allocated. So it's important in our community to educate people to be participating in the census. Budget, Todd spoke on. STI Council, nothing new really. We didn't have a meeting, and we'll hear what's going on there at our later board meeting. And ASBSD, they had state convention in August, and many of us attended. Had some great speakers and education funding, and then they honored Governor Dugard at that, and some other educators. And I think the Pierce School Board won their school board awards. Yeah. Okay, this week we had the Education Foundation meeting. Their financial review, their portfolio is $125,000 in endowment. Their goal is $130,000 by the end of the year, and year-to-date they've raised about $87,000. We had the education breakfast, and there was a record turnout of 180 people. There were 70 donors. Of those 70, 30 were new donors. They had 100% board giving. They reached their goal of raising that morning $20,000. They had the teacher swap. They had record attendance there, and that being a little over 200 in attendance. The Graham Auto Group has kicked off their campaign, and that is if you go and test drive one of their vehicles, you will get the chance to allocate $20 to a teacher of your choice in the Sioux Falls School District. Those gift certificates are given out through the Education Foundation. And last, we all have an incentives. It will be through the end of the year, December 31st, and it's any car. And it's any of their cars. It is running parallel somewhat to the Volkswagen national campaign, and that is Drive Bigger, supporting classrooms. Last, you all have in front of you an invitation to the public school crowd. It's a fundraising event for the foundation, $100 per person, November 7th from 6 to 9:30 at Raven headquarters in the Royal Hall. So I hope you're able to attend.
One thing I'd add on the leadership council meeting, mental health is a big topic. Mental health issues being felt across the community, from the police department to the judiciary to the community to the city, so the topic will be tackling in that group in the near future, or in the coming year at least. I had conflict with the PAC committee meeting. We've got another one coming up here in a few weeks. Policy, we had a lengthy discussion on several, just teasing, on some financial policies that will be coming up for review. Most of them didn't have any changes. Review in the first.
So Kate talked about policy, and the only other one I have is the calendar committee. We are not currently meeting. We won't meet again until probably February, March-ish, right? Something, so, yeah.
Anything else with the order? Just wait for the okay. Seeing no further discussion, we have a motion to adjourn. So moved. Second. Those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Meeting's adjourned. We'll have a little break for us to hear. Seeing a new